Well, hello everyone. This is the third Red Rampant Rundown, if you count the talk that Jake gave, which you can watch on our channel if you're interested in the more business side of things when it comes to making a game, because unfortunately it isn't all about codes and dialogue. Unfortunately, there's the hard reality of marketing, accountants, and all that. So if that is of any interest to you, go check that out on the channel. But today, we've got a slightly different episode for you. Less about the game and more about Jake and myself. And through telling that story, uh, we'll tell the origins of how Red Rampant came to be. We'll talk about how Jake and I met and how that creative partnership was forged. And it's a good one. It's a good one. And we hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, Chris, let's talk about us. That's what it's all about, really. We
That's
just
why you
made a
make a
game to put all
podcast.
the focus on us. Yeah. So let me take this all the way back then to when I first came up with the idea for a game set in medieval Scotland, because I had no plan of making a game. I was just chatting with a friend and we were talking about Robert the Bruce and some of the interesting battle tactics that he used in the Second Scottish War for Independence in the early 1300s, about how it wasn't these big grand battles, because if they met on open field, Scotland would be heavily outnumbered, but instead it was these small skirmishes with um, tight, well trained bands of troops. And these kind of 10v10, 20v20 skirmishes sounded really interesting. Sounded like a really fun game. And I was like, oh, that would be a fun game. That would be really interesting, kind of Scottish historical medieval slasher narrative kind of thing. And then I was like, oh, why isn't that a game? I'd never heard of it. Never heard of it. And then I kind of searched around a bit and it wasn't really a thing. And at the time I was a lifeguard. And I don't know if anyone listening has ever been a lifeguard. You don't really have that much to do most of the time. You're kind of just watching people swim. Very rarely do people drown. No one did on my shift, but I spent most of my shifts kind of world building in my head, coming up with all these ideas of how this whole game would work. And I mean, fast forward a year of just writing notes in my phone. I had um well this was an accumulated series of notes and Word documents that one day I added it all up and it came to like over 100,000 words, which is more than the first Harry Potter book, which I was like, oh, that's a lot of writing, a lot of different ideas about how this game works, because it was just ideas at that point. It was just for fun. And then one day I'm in Glasgow Central Station. Some of you might have clocked that straight away and been like, why is his background a train station? This is Glasgow Central Station. Why have I got that as a background, Chris?
Well, Jake, the reason that you've got Central Station as your background is so that's where me and you met on New Year's Eve, and a fateful meeting that is not hyperbole or being dramatic to say, a meeting that changed my life, because without that meeting, Red Rampant wouldn't exist in the state it is in, and me and you would not have become such close friends and such close collaborators. And yeah, a meeting that really one of those forks in the road sort of moment. That like I always wanted to create a game, and little did I know that that day, that dream would be realized
A
with that.
fateful day.
It was a fateful day. It was a fateful. It's a peculiar day, I know. It's a peculiar day, and it was an insight into the kind of character I was getting involved in. Was that meeting? Uh, it just it's a very Jake sort of encounter. Jake had this thing where uh, he would go up to people and ask them a question and say, "Can I ask you a question?" And I was one of those people that you asked the question. And on that day, I was sat on one of those benches you see in his backdrop, and I was holding in my lap this Bloodborne board game. And this was a mate of mine whose birthday is on New Year's. So he loves Bloodborne, and I had the gift on. And that's a crucial part because I don't think if it was for that board game, I don't think if it was for that birthday of my mates, I don't think Jake might have approached me. He might have approached someone else that day because he saw that, seen that I've probably got an interest in games. So there's a safe bet there. There's a common territory. So he walks up and asks, "Can I ask you a question?" Now, my first response was no. Kind of, I'm sitting here. I'm just wanting to get my train and go meet my pal. And you don't like anyone that's been in Glasgow, particularly as well, spent any time in Glasgow. When some guy in Glasgow comes up and asks you if if they've got time for a question, it's usually going to lead to like a long-winded story or some favor they want off you. So yeah, I was
And it was
apprehensive.
both.
Yeah, yeah, it was both. It was both. I was right on the money. I was right on the money. Uh, and yeah, you just started chatting to me about this game, and it took like a couple minutes for me to kind of settle into it because it was still a bit peculiar, and I was like, "This is really strange." Like this guy's just pitching me a video game at Central New Year's Eve. Like it took me a while to get into the rhythm of it, and then slowly but surely, I was like, "Here, there might be something to this. There might be something to this." And we traded a couple ideas. I think I asked a couple of questions about it, kind of interrogative questions, and I kind of liked the answers you were given. And then it was a relatively brief chat as well because we both had to catch trains, so it was like a kind of 10-ish minute conversation. And then you stood up and walked away to go get your train. And I think we added each other on Facebook. And then when you walked away, I was like, "Oh, that was bizarre." And I genuinely thought that was it. Like, I added you on Facebook, you know, you were just gonna be another name, another weird conversation, just another wee memory to look back and going, that was pretty odd. Uh, and yeah, just thought I'd get on with my life. And then just a few days after that, traded a couple of texts about it. And even then, it was like me trying to assess just how much I wanted to get into this. And also, just for added context, I was getting into my career in TV. I was in my first job in TV, and that was all so important to me, and that was all that kind of took up my headspace. So in my eyes, I really did not want to get entangled with this. Like that was my position. I was like, this is quite fun. I can just kind of talk about this and as a side thing. And then, but slowly but surely, I kind of just got ensnared by it. Slowly but surely, it went from being Jake's game to both our game. Slowly but surely. And I couldn't tell you what precise point that was, but I, it happened, and I never planned for it to happen. Just like any good relationship.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like a rom-com where you're just like, oh, nothing serious, cycle a lot of stuff on my plate, just a wee fling, swap numbers, see what happens, and then before you know it, uh, no, it's fun to hear that from your perspective because well, I remember it more from my perspective, and going around asking people that question. I had a specific way I word, excuse me, sorry, can I ask you a question? And it just kind of disarms a lot of people. And then but you did say yes, but you maybe felt no.
Yeah.
A lot of people will just kind of like, because it just kind of like be quite disarmed by it, and you just kind of start chatting to
Aye.
random people about nothing sinister. I just want to talk about video games or
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
random
yeah, yeah.
thought that was in my mind.
Yeah, yeah.
um and yeah, if you didn't have that board game, I totally would, because you had your headphones on, like you were like do not disturb, like
Wait, did I have my headphones on? Oh shit, yeah, yeah.
yeah, you had your headphones on. I fucking tapped you on your shoulder,
Oh,
you unplugged.
um, how how
You
rude of
probably
you,
thought I
man.
was asked
How
some
rude,
sort
man.
of tourist being like, which one's the
Oh,
fucking train?
oh man.
No, I mean, yeah, it was rude of me. And I've
Yeah,
not just been rude to you, I've been rude to many people by just asking them conversations. Don't do it as much anymore.
yeah.
That was my wild uni years. I just started speaking to strangers. God no, keep that social circle small and close
Aye,
nowadays.
aye. You don't want to drink
Um,
too much. But no, no, no.
no, no, no.
I'm grateful you did. I'm grateful you did. It's like one of those lessons in life where you're like, at first you sort of feel like, oh, what is happening? Like things that are uncomfortable or you're unsure or uncertain about, and you're like, no way in chance is this going to lead to like the unlikely things that you can encounter in life that you can just toss away because it doesn't feel right, and then you let it slowly grow and it becomes literally my passion project. You know what I mean? It is bizarre for me to like remember how I felt in that moment of slight annoyance and slight sort of like, oh, I just want to get on with my day, to then like how close we've become and this game that now exists in Steam. Like that is quite a weird sort of journey because yeah, if like my life would have been so different if you hadn't actually approached me as well. Like this game wouldn't exist. I would have spent so much hours and so much resources, so much of me into this game. I have no idea what I would have done with that part of myself if this game hadn't existed. And to know that it all traces back to you asking a question because you went through a weird phase because you wanted to talk to strangers. I don't know. That's just this sort of like weird what if moment that does play in my
Yeah,
mind.
well, I think from my perspective, you're kind of saying like, "Oh, what a weird like singular event like happened," and then that like from my perspective, it's also this kind of perspective of like I had been pitching the game to people all the time, people I knew, people I didn't know, because people I knew were sick of me telling about the game,
Aye.
and a lot of them at the time, somewhat to this day, are just kind of like, ah, yeah, I mean, sounds all right, but like, that's not really my thing. Like that, I don't really go for that kind of stuff. But I think the difference with you, the reason we weren't just strangers in each other's Facebook friends list being like, who is that? Why do I care if it's their birthday? No, but the reason it went beyond that, we started meeting up and writing together, is because you did have that kind of like interrogative style. You did have that eye for a story, and you did have um that passionate tendency to deconstruct a concept to its like core components, identify the emotions being evoked by those components, and then kind of overlay those evoked emotions with the emotions you're trying to with the emotions you're pursuing
Yeah.
in your listener, and seeing that whole thing as a creative, and as a creative who wasn't really taking it, as neither of us were looking at it so much as like an ego perspective of this is my idea and you have to tell me it's amazing. Like I was very happy to have someone tell me why this couldn't work or doesn't work or
Aye.
should work like that. Because I think when you tell a lot of people about your creative project, and a lot of people listening will probably be able to relate to this, when you tell someone about your creative project, even if it's quite a cool one or maybe it's a bad one, a lot of people just kind of like nod along and yeah, oh yeah, sounds cool. And that's kind of not what you're looking for when you're saying stuff. Like
Yeah.
that only goes so far. It's like a minor dopamine boost, but it's really not the fuel that's going to take your project to the next goal. What you really need is to find the kind of person who can go back and forth with you on that. It needs to be a back and forth. It can't just all be praise, or can't just all be kind of shrugs and nods. It needs to be a deeper conversation than that. And I think that style is something that we built up over months and years, and now we have today where we can both call each other out on any specific idea, and we both approach ideas in different ways, something that we'll probably be discussing in future rundowns when we talk about how we make a character and the process of our writing, and why we make certain decisions, and the dynamics of my brain and Chris's brain on or are you this way?
Yeah. 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 Aye.
Okay,
Correct.
sorry, I've
Correct.
got it flipped. um anyway, so the second time I met Chris um was also in Glasgow. We just decided to meet up, and he kind of limped over towards me. And I remember it quite clear. I remember saying to him, "Oh, you hurt your foot or something?" And he was like, "No, I've got cerebral palsy." And I was like, "Oh, I had no idea," because the whole interaction that we had last time, you were sitting down, uh, I had no idea. It was me walking over to you, yapping, and then leaving. And I didn't know that you had cerebral palsy. It was kind of a funny. It's kind of funny when you meet someone like that and you're like, oh, I really don't know anything about you. Like, uh, and gradually you get to know the person. Gradually you form a relationship working on that project and establish dynamics. And you were saying earlier just how much we talk to each other on like a regular basis is it's a lot. um,
And even on that meeting, uh, like the fact that I told you straight off the bat that it was cerebral palsy is like a sign that I had good vibes from you, by the way, because my response to that question has really changed over the years, and it's very sort of contextual on how I feel about that person. Just as a little side note, cerebral palsy is just like a, f- a physical condition where some of the muscles don't work as effectively as they should, and it's just to do with brain signals going to different limbs and stuff like that. Anyway, because
it's asymmetric, so it gives you a kind of limp.
aye, it's asymmetric, but like when people hear cerebral palsy, they can think of the more intellectual side of it, where the maybe kind of slower speech or slower mind, etc.
Mm.
Uh, but no,
Well,
it's
the
just
word cerebral, you
yeah,
think
yeah,
it's a
exactly.
brain thing, but it's
Aye,
it's more of a body thing.
yeah. At least the way it manifests for me, it's very far ranging. But yeah, a lot of times in my life, even now, sometimes I will just say, "Oh, mate, I played football, rough tackle," and then that'll be it.
Oh,
That'll be it.
really?
Yeah, yeah, that is like a common defense mechanism for me because strangely for me, I hate having to like explain myself in like every social kind of like it's so rare that people need to almost justify themselves or justify such a deep part of themselves, like immediately having to give that away, be that vulnerable. You know, what I mean, no one is rare in conversations where the first or second question you get asked in a meet up is, what's that condition you've got? But because mine's is so visible, that people feel like they've got more of a license to talk about it. So the fact that I was
I
actually,
think it's also,
yeah,
sorry, I
no,
think
that's
it's
all right.
also the dynamic that your condition is like very mistakable for someone not having a condition. You know, it's not like you have like a visible like big birthmark on your face or like burns
Aye,
or something like that, where it's clearly something bad or something problematic has happened to the person. Um, your condition, it just looked, I just thought you'd hurt your foot.
yeah,
As you
yeah,
say,
aye,
it's so when someone's asking, they don't even realize that they're
yeah,
asking a person about that kind of thing, if that makes sense.
yeah. I to just kind of people are like, oh, Chris, you're just talking about yourself. Like, I've I've thought about like what that cerebral palsy means for for my writing as well, and the way I sort of connect with characters and people. And like Jake just mentioned there about like me being able to view things emotionally and always focus on what we're evoking. Like for me, stories are like if someone's given you their time to experience a story that you've written, they're asking you, make me feel something. Like just make me feel something. What why have I watched this? Why am I listening to this song? Because I'm asking you to make me feel something. And what I think Cerebral Palsy's done partly for me is I think it's made me more emotionally intelligent and more empathetic because of that slight outsider status and also dealing with a sort of day to day aches and pains that the condition comes along with. When you've got that to kind of wrestle with day to day, it does make you more empathetic. So I think that's when I used to send early versions of like films and TV that I'd written. Uh, Jake would always comment, "Well, you always really go for the emotions. You know, that's always your guideline."
Yeah, then after a while of chatting on this, few months, I think, we decided to meet up and have a call with a person called Fiona Watson, someone we'd reached out to in the hopes of a discussion. Fiona Watson, for those of you who don't know, should I be saying Dr. Fiona Watson? I got the feeling
Maybe.
like it's like she has a PhD in this.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like she has a
yeah,
PhD.
yeah. Sorry, Fiona.
Um, sorry, Doctor. Sorry, Doctor Fiona Watson. Fiona Watson is an absolute boffin in Scottish medieval history. If Fiona doesn't know it, nobody knows it. It's not a thing that's known. She has written multiple books, featured in multiple documentaries. She had a chat with us and is our historical consultant for the game. And it was really cool to ground our free form world building chats with some historical realism,
Mm,
with some true storytelling. And this is one of the things that we actually connected with her on at the time, which was a lot of media content about medieval Scotland is just made up nonsense, telling just Braveheart is a very common example, listing off all of the historical inaccuracies in that movie, which we're not going to necessarily go down that rabbit hole today, but to to say, why are you making up stuff when the truth is also really interesting?
mm,
Like, it's not a
mm,
story that needs extra sauce to be interesting.
aye.
It's an incredibly compelling story, purely based on the truth. And we also connected on Bruce as a character because again in a lot of media, Bruce is portrayed as this hero of heroes, this champion of the people, this destined to do great kind of stuff. And we were like, he kind of killed a guy in a church, and we kind of wanted to play him a bit more like a power hungry guy trying to control Scotland, and using fighting for Scotland as his kind of like moral justification and his kind of like big push to be like, let's all do this thing and it's worth it, and this is the good idea, kind of pushing that on a war-torn country that really didn't, a lot of people didn't want another battle, didn't want another war.
Mm, mm,
And a lot of his journey to power was very complex, and it was very it involved a lot of underhanded stuff. And we wanted to portray him as not just this kind of like Scotland's golden boy,
mm,
but as a lot as a layered personality with some darker elements, of some more power hungry elements, and that is reflected in the history, and it's reflected in the way that we want to portray Bruce. Not necessarily making him a villain at all, but exploring anti-hero, exploring anti-villain, exploring characters that have a bit more complexity rather than just this hero perspective, and telling that whole story not from the perspective of Bruce, but from the perspective of a countryman, of someone kind of looking up to this guy who's telling them to march into the war. We have this whole dialogue that we wrote for the father, just after you fight with a sword for the first time, where he warns the player to be careful who they swing their sword for, because I think there was a lot of calls to arms, especially in those time periods. There was a lot of people that were saying, "Hey guys, come fight for me. I'll save everyone." Um, and for a long time, it looked like Bruce wasn't going to do it. It looked like he
mm.
had just kind of got this cult clan following to march
Aye.
to their death. Um,
I mean that was such a good conversation for us, because it was a key point in that journey from like just scribbling in notes, just me and him, just me and Jake, to like steadily bringing it out of that kind of safe space. And that Fiona chat was like one of the first moments where I was like, I'm getting really energized by this chat I'm having, and I'm actually speaking to a Bruce expert. Like this no longer felt like just a wee daft project at the side. I don't know. That felt like one of the first moments where I was like, yeah, we're actually getting a wee bit serious about this, uh, and just getting really invigorated by what we're chatting about, like treating Scottish history with respect, but also telling our own story with it, and knowing just like kind of how like the ripe kind of storytelling that we had there. Like it kind of made me believe more in the promise of what we had. And actually, I don't know if you remember this, mate, but after the call, proper cringe moment. But I remember us like high fiving afterwards. We've gone, oh my God, we really lost. It's so cringe.
Oh, we didn't.
Absolutely so cringe. We did,
Oh
mate. We
no.
did.
Oh, cut
Uh,
this, man. Get this cut. That's
uh,
the good thing about just doing all the things online, man. Just calling all the time is that we never do shit like
I know, I
that.
know. That's why we can't be the same room together, mate. So,
They just end up high five and did we
aye.
jump at the same time? There's a freeze frame.
Hey,
I think we should do a call with Fiona at some point. I think that would be really interesting to get her deeper perspective on some of these topics, the way that we remember that, and also her perspective on what she thought we
yeah,
were when we had that call. It'd be great to get a call with Fiona. We'll give her a message. Fiona, if you're watching, let's have a call.
yeah.
Let's have a chat.
Aye,
And then at the end we can freeze frame high five. That would be great.
aye. So, guys, that's part one of a more personal Red Rampant rundown. Hope you enjoyed that. I think I'm speaking for Jake as well as myself that we actually quite enjoyed telling that story. Uh, we haven't actually spoken about a lot of those moments amongst ourselves for quite some time. So it was a quite good wee stroll down memory lane, and hopefully there was a few wee tidbits there of kind of creative process and being open to life, being open to life and what life throws at you. I think is one of the morals of that story. But in part two, we'll kind of it's when things got more regimented, more serious character work, and more efforts to actually make this daft wee game a reality. So, but with still some more personal nuggets in there too. So if you enjoyed this part one, part two should be on the way.